districts have been receiving 25,000 Uganda shillings per month, and that has been going on. But as of the 1st of July 2019, everything will change, with 80-year-olds being the ones that will actually be able to receive this amount of money. Now, it has been a conversation that has caused a lot of uproar for some, as you could see on reality on the ground and also on social media, wondering, an 80-year-old in a country where the life expectancy should be about 60 to 62. Well, we're continuing the conversation, and I am joined by, first of all, Honorable Otto Edward McMott. You're most welcome.
Thank you.
He is the Member of Parliament for Agago County. And I'm also joined by the one and only Patrick Katabazi Chichoncho, the coordinator for the Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. Now, I do know that Honorable is very passionate about the elderly, and I'd like you to just first of all fill us in about the elderly and where you come from in this conversation.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, viewers. I grew up in this community like everyone else, and I grew up believing that your blessing comes from the good things that you do to the elderly people. So I remember as a young child, I would try to find ways of pleasing the older people. And the practice was they'd come and say certain words of blessings. I know in Agago, which borders Karamoja, sometimes they would even spit in your hands and put around your chest, and I would feel that that's part of the reason why I would end up performing well in school. I would be lucky not to be a victim of atrocities and among other things. So I believe my luck was derived from the goodness, especially to the elderly people. The young ones don't confer that blessing, but the elder people confer that blessing. So that's pretty much in the end.
Okay, and with Mr. Patrick Katabazi Chichoncho, I would just like to, first of all, you have been a part of this program from the start. If I do gather that from when the pilot program did start in 2010, in regards to whether it was going to actually go ahead or not, and after Cabinet actually approved it, he has been at the forefront of it and has seen it change over the years. Now we're in 2019, 9 years later, and a change that has had a number of people wondering, how is this possible? 80-year-olds, 25,000 Uganda shillings, can they even really be able to pick it up? Mr. Katabazi, please do let us know of where this is coming from in regards to the Ministry of Gender.
Well, the program has been ongoing since almost 2004 when these policy discussions started. So, but about 2008, some of these discussions entered into economic policy arena, and in 2010, Government of Uganda entered into an agreement with government partners, particularly DFID and Irish Aid, to implement the pilot project for social protection, looking particularly at two grants. One of them being the one of them being the senior citizens grant and the household vulnerability grant. So the pilot phase ended in 2015. To note, at the start of the pilot phase, about 20,000 was being paid to every beneficiary. So it was increased to 25 by 2015. So in 2015, arising out of the successes that were registered in the pilot phase, Government of Uganda and government partners entered into a fresh memorandum of understanding for the purposes of scaling up this project because of the successes that it had registered. And a need to take it to every district of this country arose, but again the issue of financing also became pertinent. So to that very end, they agreed on the partial national rollout, in which 55 districts in Uganda would implement this program, and the government of Uganda would commit at providing counterpart financing to this program. So it started targeting 55 years, 50-year-old people in this country, in the 15 pilot districts of this country. But then in 2015, because of limited financing and the desire to scale up this program, there was a resolution that was made by Parliament to at least cover 100 oldest persons in every sub-county in this country. That also did not become tenable, and just last year, Parliament came up with the view that if this program was extended to older persons above 80 years, that would be, in my view, the cheapest, in their view, the cheapest way to have every older person of that age covered, and this program touching each and every corner of this country. And that was precisely so because the social protection programs in Uganda and elsewhere in the world are political programs. So you cannot have members of parliament appropriating money to go to 15 districts of this country, 40 districts of this country, when some of their constituents or some of their constituencies are missing. So why the age was increased was because of limited resources, but also the need to cover each and every sub-county, each and every constituency of this country to meet, in part, political expectations.
So as we try to meet political expectations, of course, usually it comes at a cost, and right now the cost is the fact that a number of Ugandans are saying, how is this possible? There is one thing that, yes, you want to be able to meet and cover everyone's need, and with a limited budget, because as of now the government has mentioned that all they have for this in particular is 142 billion Uganda shillings. But as they do that, how effective is it going to be? Because an 80-year-old, because one of the reasons that the stage beneficiaries was made is to make sure that they reduce on poverty and the vulnerability of the elderly.
Yes, I understand where you're coming from, and we share the same feeling about that. But what we have been made to understand from the policymakers and government officials is that the 80-year-old cap is a stopgap measure, is to address the current problem of a limited resource envelope. But it is expected in the medium term that and this is the medium term I'm talking about between 5 and 10 years, that progressively every financial year there will be an addition in the resource envelope that will extend the age cap backwards. So we expect that in the next between 5 and 10 years, 65-year cap is going to be restored. So it will be progressive, it will go backwards. From 80 to 75 as and when resources become available. So what we should play for is availability of resources, and my view is that if resources become available next year, then there wouldn't be a problem, because the problem right now is availability of resources according to Ministry of Finance.
As we get back to the regression, first of all, I'd like to also ask you, Honorable, where does that put you as a member of Parliament who's also trying to make sure that every district, every county is catered for? Is this the most effective way to do it, by increasing the age?
Thank you for that question. I see the dilemma. And I think there's a funding gap, there's a problem, and from my understanding, as opposed to the cost, leaving it the way it is, where you spend about 524 billion, by increasing the age, capping it at 8 and above, it's going to bring it down to 142 billion. Yes. So in some ways it becomes less costly at the end of the day. But I think the dilemma we see with that is, one, what you pointed out, that the WHO data says that the age, the life expectancy for is 60 for female and 60 for male and 62 for women. So I can see many people not being able to reach that age and getting that benefit. That is one problem. So I think that the pilot project had envisaged that, it was well researched and all that. So if we had followed that, I think maybe we would be able to address that. But there's a real big dilemma, because even the way it is working right now, like in Agago, I was talking to the community development officer, and I'm told in the sub-counties as opposed to the town council, there's already that disparity, because normally when they try to give the benefit, they start with the oldest person.
Before they get to the
so
65-year-old.
there are different age caps for different sub-counties depending on poverty levels, among other things. But at the core of it all, I see, I do not dispute the fact that there's a funding gap. I think, what are the funding options? I will explore that enough in order to increase funding. What are some of the benchmarks out there? How have other countries dealt with these issues? I practice law in Canada as a barrister and solicitor. Currently, I'm moving a private member. I've been granted leave to bring a trust bill before Parliament. I did estate law in Canada, and I did some of the things. The biggest dilemma here is also, I mean, it should be a holistic approach.
Yes.
Obviously, there are issues of corruption that have been noted. There are issues of fraud issues. There are issues of proper data for determination of eligibility. Is age alone the determinant factor? What about some old people who are very wealthy, who are billionaires, who are above 70, who are 80 but very rich at the end of the day? So all these things, in my view, needs to be addressed. Otherwise, the way it is right now, if you're going to say you're only going to pay people from 80 and above, you're going to end up pretty much almost giving or trying to give, but actually not in any way giving. Yes.
You're saying you want to give, but you're holding on to the other end.
So that's the dilemma we are in. We are going to be in if we go with this 80 and trying to spread thin to the extent that we end up almost not being I mean, obviously, like you suggested, you're saying maybe we reduce it to 15,000.
Yes.
25,000 is not enough. So look at me. So we are spreading ourselves too thin to the extent that we may end up actually being not doing a meaningful thing. But still, then I want to thank the government. Because the longest journey begins with the first step, and like you say, over the years there'll be some progress. Hopefully, we'll get more funding. But I think we need to address issues of data issues. In Canada, for example, I was telling you, the people file the individual taxes. So at the end of the day, you know what somebody makes in a year. At the end of the day, you know who is making a certain threshold, like the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, which I think is something that we should study carefully. Is one way in which Canada, Ontario government has funded, insurance, health insurance, national health insurance for everyone. It is failed in America, but it worked there. But how does it work? In that case, it is similar to our culture. It is set in such a way that those who makes a certain income threshold in a year, they take a portion of their money and they use it to pay an insurance premium that covers the elderly people. So I think unless we work out the way this current system is set up is set for failure. For failure.
As you can see, for a number of people, they are hesitant about it in regards to the fact that maybe it might fail here and there. But one other question, and I want to ask you, Mr. Chichoncho, is in regards to the data that has been collected so far. How many people do we see within the age of 80? So because I know the bracket has been 65 and above. About how many in each county could you roughly estimate are of the age of 80?
Now, I think, first of all, I'm very optimistic about this move. We've started from somewhere. Every journey begins with a very first step. And this is an opportunity for launching Uganda into comprehensive social protection discussion. Previously, we didn't have any of that. And for me, that has been worrying for the future vulnerability that we might be exposed to as a country. Remembering the fact that we only have less than 500,000 civil servants covered under pension scheme, and then we have about 1 million under NSSF, which is, by the way, Provident Fund that may not, in the current circumstances, be viewed to be a pension program. So meaning that the bulk of the Ugandans in today and probably times to come will be vulnerable if we cannot kick off this social protection, comprehensive social protection discussion. That said, we have data from UBOS that does give a number of people in terms of their age categories. But also remember that recently the National Identity Card registration process has been able to bridge the gap and weed out some of the challenges that we have had. And as a matter of fact, registration for beneficiaries for SAGE has largely been based on the ID.
Okay.
So before a community is enrolled, people in charge of the registration NIRA is given an opportunity to do verification and register people, and that's the basis for the register we're talking about. Currently, this program is reaching about 150,000 people, and with the current budget that we're talking about in the next financial year, it is expected to capture about 350,000 people. Those are people estimated to be above 80 years. So, but when you look again at the numbers, both from UBOS and also the simulated statistics over in the medium term, we expect about 1 million older persons above 65 years.
Okay.
So to say that we are spreading thin, well, is probable, but looking at 35% in my view, because if you cover 365,000 against people who are 65 years, 1 million, you're talking about a coverage of 65%. So if we can start with 65% and reaching each and every corner of this country, I think in my view that's a very good start. So people have been talking about how much money. You have had the discussion before this, and this is a debate that has been on for a long time.
From 2004,
yes, we have suggested to government that they need to do progressive review to take into account the inflation rate.
Yes.
And my current estimation, technically speaking, would be that from the last revision from 2025, I think we should be about an additional 5,000, which would be about 30,000, which the difference of 5,000 will be able to bridge the inflation gap. But having said that, 25,000, according to studies, have done tremendous work in these communities. I know between me and you, this is very little money, because in any case, our lunch or breakfast could be so much. I mean, could be 50,000 just a meal. But when you look at the impact assessments that have been done by government, Minister of Finance and Minister of Gender, it has made very, very, very many, in my view, miracles in some of these communities. To start with, these older persons, some of them, including some households, by the way, in this country, cannot spend 20,000 in the entire year in terms of the money they spend at the shop. And what are these expenditure items that we're looking at? Talking about salt, we're talking about soap, and we're talking about paraffin. Most of our communities can't be able to get money direct from their gardens into their homes. I know that some people are concerned and saying, you know, why don't you abolish this and invest this money in service provision? Let me tell you, even if you had a hospital in the 10-kilometer radius, can an 80-year-old person walk or take herself to that health center? If you say you are investing this money in agriculture, government, rather in nuts for seeds, can an 80-year-old person go to the garden to speak? Why are we not saying the same of civil servants and other people who work and then get entitlement to pension? So for me, this sum that we are talking about is a shot in the arm. And it does not only, as a matter of fact, help direct beneficiaries, but in the community at large. For instance, in the community where this program has been implemented in the last, from 2011 to 2015, about 222 billion has been spent in those communities. That supports backward and forward linkages in terms of the business opportunities in those areas. Remember, for every payday that, like for instance, in the parish districts that would be announced, you're having about 60 million paid in the sub-county. You already have market centers that started forming around the pay point for areas, because
on that very day when you go to pick up the money,
it's because there is money now in the community that is, and that is a wider objective of social protection, kickstarting the economy and getting money across vulnerable communities.
Now, just to stop you there for a second, Mr. Chichoncho, as we talk about the positivity of all the things that could come in with this, even for the 80-year-olds, one thing that we need to talk about, and you did mention, is the fact that how many of these 80-year-olds can be able to actually pick up this money? Aren't we going to look at situations where we have people taking advantage of the fact, and maybe there are loopholes here and there in regards to picking it? From what you did share, I do know that if you can't pick up the money yourself, you can send maybe a member of the family, yes? And also the fact that won't we have a number of people taking advantage of this?
Now, the experience has been that you have scenarios where you have people who are 80-year-old, but they are very strong.
Okay. How
But
many
again,
scenarios would we have of that?
yes, you are talking about 60% of these people who are very strong and who, and some of them very literate, by the way. But again, you have others who might be frail and might need support. And the program has put in place a very elaborate mechanism where a beneficiary has been assisted or has been requested to nominate someone who can be able to pick money on their behalf. And this is something that is progressively reviewed. So meaning that if there is an issue that has been identified for a particular beneficiary as regards to accessing his or her money, then it is something that can easily be sorted. But I do agree with you entirely that in a community such as the ones that we come from, me and you, they are bound to have some situations where somebody can be taken advantage of.
Okay. So in regards to the regression, which you did mention, Honorable, what would you say? Because as it stands, you are saying that in regards to the Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, what will happen is that right now there could be 80-year-olds that will receive as of 1st July 2019, but as the years go by, we will see it regress to 65-year-olds also receiving this 25,000 or even more, depending on how much the government has available. Do you think that this is going to be something, Honorable, that we can actually go by? Are we going to maybe have the poverty line actually going higher now than it has been, because it had reduced? As of U-Boat statistics, it had reduced in regards to 2016-2017.
Yeah, I think from speaking to the CDO of Agago, where I come from, and it's one of the districts, the pilot districts. What I understood was that in the sub-counties, in the real rural areas, it's hard to get people at the age of 80. Most of them die before that age. Okay. Actually, if you look at in the town council, according to them, you'd find because of there's more better health care, better some bit of income and all that. So you find people going to the higher age. So the danger also is that at 80 you find in some ways that most of the beneficiaries are actually in the urban centers where there's some standard of living in a way. So that's places like Karamoja, places like the real deep rural areas. I think this needs to be looked at carefully. You'll probably find that you may not be reaching them as much as the urban centers. From the data that when I spoke to the CDO of Agago, that's what she was telling me, that there were variations when they counted from the old days to there were different age variations. But I think, like I said, we have to start somewhere. I appreciate the efforts that have been made. As a member of parliament, when there's nothing like this, the burden is on us.
Still on you.
I think as a member of parliament, I always tell my friend, it's like you're running a ministry without a budget, or you're running a ministry from your own pocket. If this fund is not there, at the end of the day, we have to take care of the elders from our own pocket at the end of it. So I appreciate the progress that has been made. I think I appreciate what is being done with very little limited resources. So doing that is something that I am in agreement with. I think I'm also optimistic that this is going to change at the end of the day. For me, my focus is not so much on how we are beating heights on the wall, trying to make things work. Yes, something is being done there, but I think a holistic approach dealing with the funding issues. Can we just keep on getting government, parliament appropriating and putting money like that without finding a sort of a scheme, just like I talked about the way the Ontario Health Insurance Plan has been funded. That's part of the social protection thing. When you talk about representations reporting death, among other things. Ordinarily, in the legal sense, you have a power of attorney for property for somebody to come, and in this case, I know that you can, yes, periodic review will be able to troubleshoot some of this problem, but I still think that there's a big challenge in those areas, the issues of corruption, among other things. So obviously is very right that even 25,000 shilling in a deep rural village where poverty is biting, that is something. That is something at the end of the day. But I still think that we need to go beyond that amount. We need to make it work, and we need to figure out a way of making it sustainable, especially when we look at a country like Uganda. Obviously, the argument from the other side, if you look at the ministerial policy statement, you look at the budget framework papers, you look at the country's focus on trying to have figures of the economy, like infrastructure development, among other things. There's real competing interests here. But I think this is an area in Canada, the most respected Prime Minister of all time in Canada, whose son is the current Prime Minister, made a statement that is always quoted, that the test of a developed nation is not the skyscrapers that you see, whatever, as we used to understand it. The test of a developed nation is how it treats its lowest member of the society. So for us, if we are going to say we are developed, or we are talking about development, we can't talk about development without thinking of the most vulnerable, the elderly people, who in most cases are grandparents who have contributed to society. We need to look at them. But I think nobody disagrees with what has been studied.
Yes.
I think the issue is how can we make it sustainable? How can we make sure there are more funds? How can we make sure that it works using benchmarks and best practices that are out there?
And as you talk about the fact that we shouldn't be looking at the skyscrapers and the number of things that look good for Uganda at the moment, yes, there are a number of positive things about our country as it stands. But one of the things is that in the news today in Nakaseke district, it has been reported that there are a number of women who have tried to change their age. Whatever age they were, they're trying to get to 65 and above. Why? Because they want to be a part of the 60-year-olds, 65 and above, that get the 25,000 Uganda shillings. Now, what is going to happen when it's 80 years of age? But the thing right now with sharing all that story, it's in regards to the fact that where does it leave the 65-year-old that have been a part of this?
Now, my understanding of the issue is that the program is going to be maintained in areas where, at the same level in the areas where it has been implemented
in
before.
The 57 districts as it stands.
And he did mention Karamoja, which in my view, in our social policy discussion, social protection discussion, is a very unique area. And in fact, even when the age was fixed at 65, not many people in Karamoja would make the mark. As a matter of fact, government partners and the government of Uganda at the time revised the age for the beneficiaries in Karamoja from 65 to 60 so that you can have a handful enrolled on the program. And that has been the case since then, and we expect it to remain so. And so shall be the case in other districts where this program to date has been implemented. What will change will be the new district that will be enrolled, but then also the new members in the rest of other districts that will be enrolled. So that will be help a little bit of clarification. Now, with an elaborate national identity card system in place, and I'm believing that is elaborate.
Given the fact that they are trying to change things here and there.
They are elaborate and watertight. They will find it very difficult to beat it. Because, I mean, changing your age will be wishful thinking. If already you had registered that you're 60, I don't know how then you will change.
Well, we're actually going to ask that. They say they put the wrong date, is what they're saying.
You put the wrong date. Yes, but then also, I recall, even before the national ID was put in place, there was a verification committee that was set up in each and every parish. and it would consist of people of different age categories.
Okay.
And they developed what you call markers, historical markers, and these would help. And then peer markers as well.
To be able to see.
So if the community is in agreement that the oldest person in this community is so and so is 90 years, and you are part of the same community, then this person must be knowing you, that you are either playmates or that you are together in the same community. So it means that one as an index.
Okay.
But then also, one of it would be the historical markers, where it said, okay, when you had independence, how old were you? At what stage of life were you? So that would also help in estimating somebody's age. And I strongly believe that the National Identification Authority used some of these to work around.
But don't you see it as a loophole? Because
yes, it is a loophole, but it is how do I call it? It is short-term loophole.
Really?
Yes, it is short-term loophole.
How so?
Yes, because we are going along. You are not going to have issues with people who are about 50 years now, because some of them have their birth certificates, some of them have passed through school, so the records are easily accessible. So in the medium term, we will not have some of these challenges where somebody cannot easily tell their age, because people are born, people die.
Okay.
Yes.
And as we get to that and hope that in the medium term it will be solved and dealt with. Honorable, what do you say about that? Because as a member of parliament for Agago County, what would you say this reflects in regards to the fact that someone might be even 50 years of age and is trying to just simply amend to be able to get just 25,000 per month by making sure they try to beat the system? What does it say of the society within Agago? What does it say of the people maybe in Imbara, in different districts along and around across Uganda?
I think it is a reflection of level of desperation, and obviously that's not a surprise. We are a very poor country. I lived for 15 years in Canada. If you look at the social protection benefits there, old age pension, many other things, most people work and the payment is over at least $1,000 per month. You know, so when you look at it, obviously, given what we have here, it's really very pathetic, very meager, and obviously there's a level of desperation. And I think when I talk of a holistic approach, I think that even if the national identification process is perfected, that itself, like I say, the eligibility test cannot simply be based on age. There should be other criteria of eligibility beyond, like for example, the financial test.
Yes.
For you're getting pension, you're in business, and how do we know? I think in this country, I know we are all expected to file individual tax return at the end of the day, but in practice people are not doing it. So at the end of the day, even if I know your age, how do I determine effectively what your income is at the end of the day? You have 100 herds of cattle, you know, and you're trying to also get 25,000. So these are all their duplications in these areas. I think issues of changing age is fraud. It is a criminal offense.
Yes, it is.
That needs to deterrent measures need to be put in place. Some examples, because abuse of trust, for example, in our jurisdiction, I practice criminal law at the same time. Abuse of trust is heavily punished. You get an elder's ATM card, they give you the PIN card, and you go and withdraw the money. After withdrawing, once you go and withdraw for your own purpose, you punish. Background checks, criminal background checks before you can work with elder vulnerable people, children, elderly, hospital. You cannot. You get a criminal record. You will never be able to work in those sectors of trust. So we need to be able to, I think, through regulations, and I know we have some good laws already in place, especially that issue, which is fraud issue. There are criminal sanctions for it. At the end of the day, we need to get an example to punish one person, and and let people get to understand that, you know, you can do this. And it has serious implications. These are vulnerable people. Imagine if you discover down the road that so and so, for maybe a few months before the periodic review, doesn't been getting money, was sick, diabetic, and person dies. So there's a gap in that area. Of course, it can be addressed, like my friend is saying. There are very many ways of addressing it. So I think yes, this is a problem. In other systems, you would have, you know, like I said, ordinarily in the legal sense, you would have a power of attorney.
Yes.
You have. That's why the trust law, the bill that I got leave of. I mean, these are trust issues at the end of the day. They are. So we're discussing this thing. Recently, we were discussing the legal committee about the succession bill in 2018, which has been now tabled before Parliament. We're going to have a debate when we get back from recess. So a lot of these things have also been, some of these loopholes have been addressed, and I think, in my view, I'm optimistic. Like, I want to say yes. We're just trying to troubleshoot some of the problems so that it works better. But I think moving in this direction is something that I want to applaud government for, and I want to appreciate the stakeholders who are involved in this environment under very difficult circumstances. Thank you.
As we appreciate the stakeholders, one thing that I want to ask the both of you is in regards to the fact that how best can we now help the elderly that are not going to be able to benefit from this? Because as it stands, you have mentioned, Mr. Chichoncho, that 57 districts that have already been receiving the 25,000 in regards to 65-year-olds and above will continue to receive it. But in the 77, now that we're moving on to 77, that leaves 20 districts where only the 80 years of age elderly and above will be receiving this amount, 25. Where does it leave those with 65 and just close to hitting 80? Because how can we help those people? What's the best method of helping get rid of the poverty line there?
Yes, so there are three things that I wanted to say. One is that social protection has been identified as one of the key tools to fight poverty. As a matter of fact, the recently concluded household survey actually revealed that in all these districts where this project has been implemented, it witnessed a reduction in poverty, even when in other areas actually poverty was on the rise.
Yes.
Now, when I mentioned the issue of financial analysis, but in my view that probably would be direct targeting, and one of the systems they use for direct targeting is using a means test where they assess you, the income that you have, your economic potential, and then choose whether to enroll in the program or not. Now, in our studies, and I've studied this in so many other countries, this is a very complicated process, because first of all, the cost of exclusion, of excluding others, is very high. Administrative cost-wise is very high. And this is particularly so in a country such as Uganda, where the difference between the rich and the poor is actually not there. In the just released report of the household survey, actually we had some people who were poor who became rich in a span of 5 years.
Okay.
But then some people in the same space of 5 years who were rich, and then by the report time 2015-16, these people were poor. So you cannot really tell who will be rich today and who will be rich tomorrow. And that is precisely because we depend, almost 70% of the population, we depend on agriculture, which has very many turbulences, weather, drought, and the like. So that makes a case for universal pension coverage other than from direct targeting or from exclusion. Because then the cost will be very high, and then you will have conflicts within the community. How did you enroll? So I'm richer than him, or I'm poorer than him. That's that kind of debate. So there is that kind of debate. I think, in my view, universal coverage, whether it is 80, let everybody 80 benefit. So it is 60. But again, you mentioned something. What happens to those who will be left out?
Yes, in those 20 districts.
In those 20 districts, and probably in many other places.
Yes.
I think we have started from somewhere. This is where we are. Members of Parliament, civil society, and other concerned people, this becomes an advocacy issue. We need to start ought to continue advocating for allocation of resources so that each and everybody who is eligible, in my view from 65 and above, gets entitled and receive this money because of the challenges that we have already highlighted. And to do our work as members of parliament, they should do the work. Every time we see an increment in our resource envelope, this should be one of the priority areas that we should receive funding. And in any case, by the way, in the financial year of 2015-16 budget, national budget framework paper discussion, financing for SAGE was voted to have a first call with the budget. So it's a priority program within political circles at all levels, and I think what needs to be matched, the political needs to be matched with the commensurate resource allocation, so that at the end of the day, we don't have members of parliament who are responsible for allocating these sums of money, but they're also crying, no money, no money.
Yes.
Yet they tell us that so much money has been stolen through the public account system. And so much money has been wasted, so much money has been collected because they receive these reports from URI and other government bodies. So I think, members of parliament, really, this is your call.
So as a member of parliament representing the members of parliament, just briefly, what would be, because as he says, let's relocate the resources, prioritizing them. What would you say briefly as we wrap this up?
I think I have stated before that first of all, what my friend has said about direct sourcing and the cost of getting all these figures together would be resolved if we were to have yearly annual returns, which people are supposed to do, except that in practice, people are supposed to file individual tax. But yes, I understand the record system, the predominantly a farming community, there are challenges in that area, but some progress has been made. We under what legal and parliamentary affairs, we have URSP.
Yes.
Recently, one of the bills that we've just tabled is the security of movable properties, where even your crops in the garden, you can register it, and that security agreement can be used to get loan. So we're moving in a situation where farmers will be able to. So clearly, which has not been. These are the kind of data that will be able to help us in a way to assess somebody's. Because now, if this bill is passed into law, even your crops that are growing can become. So anyways. Overall, I think that, I think I need to repeat something here, that what we have seen in practice is that for those areas where they are going to start only at 80, not what is going to happen is that you're going to only find people in urban centers, in cities benefiting. The rural areas, the new places, the elderly people there, you may not find people who are 80.
But then wouldn't it just say,
this is a problem.
Let's try and start from somewhere. As Mr. Chichoncho has said, let's try and start from somewhere.
It is a resolution. In my view, a resolution is merely advisory.
Yes. So
I think there's still room to improvement.
As we wait for that room, and perhaps a miracle could come our way, the 1st of July 2019, a few things will change in the elderly. Who will be able to benefit from this SAGE fund will only be those at 80 and above, so 25,000 for those in the 20 districts, while the rest who are in the 57 districts will continue to receive their 25,000 as has been. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. You can continue this using the hashtag #morning@NTV. How can we save the elderly, given that now the government has decided to increase the age? I am Rita Kanya. Thank you so much for being a part of Morning at NTV. From the entire team, have a lovely day.
Watching Morning at NTV.
You don't really think it's gonna be this easy, do you, boy? Get him!